Welcome to the Hunter's Campfire. G'day, my name is Mark van den Bogart, hunter, fisherman, writer and storyteller. With me is Ian Hurley, technologist, hunter, hunting mentor and proud father. Together we want to help you get hunting. Our focus is helping you make the most of public land hunting right here in Australia, even if you don't live in a state where it's offered. This podcast series is all about helping you get started, helping you build your knowledge and your confidence so you can get out there and live your own hunting adventures. Now, let's get started. Well, good evening, Ian. How are you?
Well, mate, very well. Blistery cold state of origin night that it is.
It is. It is very cold, but I think nowhere near as cold as it is going down south. I just saw some photos of Orange. We were down there in April, and it looks proper blizzardy country down there. So that's I am hunting down there in September, so hopefully this is well past by the time I get down there.
Oh yeah, well it is freezing. I saw a post this afternoon saying that where I am up in Toowoomba will be -4 tomorrow morning, but Stanthorpe's -8. And that's proper cold. That's real cold.
It's getting there. That's getting there. Certainly, that we're down Murrundi, which is just below Tamworth at the end of beginning of next month, and it's currently felt temperature in the Murrundi Gap, which is where the weather station is, -4.4, so something like that. So hopefully it warms up a little bit because I've got my son with me, and I just don't want to spend a weekend of him freezing to death.
Well, he might complain a little bit if that's the case, but
he will.
Such is life. That's the way it goes, isn't it?
Okay. Yes, it will. Character building, I think they call it.
Yes, true. Yeah, we got that one drilled into us once upon a time in the military. So, episode 3, and I think today's concept really is just to do a bit of a deep dive into one of our original favourite forests, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think sometimes people treat public land as like secret squirrel or private clubs, but let's make some people angry and expose the secrets of hunting Severn, or Severn, depending on how you like to pronounce it. I know that my English relatives pronounce it the Severn because it's named after the Severn River and the Severn River and the Severn Valley in England, but I've always called it Severn. So let's stick with that because then we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard many people call it the Severn. And even the main river that runs all the way through this area to me has always been the Severn, but maybe that's just the Australian way of reading the letters in the word and calling it as it is.
Yeah, we just want to get anyone confused with the one we're talking about. So basically, the Severn, as we're going to call it, State Forest, is just a little bit below the Queensland state border. Probably the closest Queensland town is Texas. And if memory serves me correctly, the closest New South Wales town is a place called Bonshaw. So technically, Severn sits directly behind Bonshaw, but you have to go a little bit further to the east along the Bruxner Highway and then turn again south down the Bonshaw Road. And I think it's only about 15 k's down that road, and then you get to the entry road to the Severn State Forest,
which is Mount Helen Road.
There you go. Road. And I think there's a little location behind it actually called Athelwood. I might have that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's behind.
And not far from Ashford, which is down near the dam there that the Severn River feeds into. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's a good little spot. Tip for those that are travelling there right off the bat is Bonshaw is the last little town. It's hardly even a town, but it's a little spot just before you get there. They do have a convenience store there that seems to be open even till 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And you'll get ice if you need to rush back out because you forgot it and you've got animals on the deck. There's always ice there. They seem to have block ice as well, and they'll serve, a feed of fish and chips if that's what you want. and some takeaway beers. So it's a handy little spot. Bit of fuel there. If you're using major fuel cards and things like that, then you want to make sure that you've got everything sorted in Texas if you're coming through it.
Yes, that's a good point. Bonshore does sell fuel. And in fact, one trip down to Severn, we actually did like an overnighter, and we actually had dinner at the shop. So we went after we drove up there on dark, got a hamburger and chips, sat outside there. Again, being New South Wales, you could buy a beer. I sat down and had a beer there, and then drove back into camp, which made it a really simple little trip. And it's a reasonable store. Of course, you're going to pay fairly significant prices, but it's got everything you need.
Convenience.
Certainly, if you're down in the forest and you need something, being able to run back up there, it makes it a very, very convenient little hunting ground. And I think that's one of the big selling points to so many people starting with Severn, is that it's relatively close. For me, it's under 4 hours from home. It's an easy drive. It's actually got a lot better over the years. There's no real need for a 4-wheel drive. You can hunt that forest comfortably in a 2-wheel drive car. If you don't mind it getting a bit dusty, because it is dirt, but if you don't mind that, you can hunt in a 2-wheel drive. And it's the getting there is not the hard part. It makes it very convenient for a lot of people. And of course, the other big thing about it is that it holds game.
That's the beauty of this one. But a point to note, though, I was on a hunt for chital last weekend in the Texas area, and up on one of the Facebook State Forest hunting pages, somebody had got their 4-wheel drive bogged at Severn, and had put the call out for anyone that was in the area to come and help him out. I think he had a very long night when the second vehicle got bogged. So the story went, and they eventually got out sometime after the sun came up the next day. So yes, you can get there 2-wheel driving as long as you're sensible and you don't go and do crazy things. Not sure this guy was. I think he just ended up in a bit of a marsh and bottomed himself out, and he couldn't get out again. So take it easy, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, well, look, I have to admit I've been bogged twice there myself, and the first time was an overnight. The recovery vehicle got bogged as well, and the guys, I walked back to camp, and the guys stayed with the 2 vehicles, and another vehicle came the Sunday morning. And another time, good mate Tim got bogged there, and we were all pretty calm because he had just had his brand new winch fitted. And there's actually I remember watching it. He was kind of looking out. He had the winch on it. It was a wide remote. So he was in the driver's seat with the winch, and he's looking at us, gives a thumbs up, hits the winch, and the winch just goes up in a ball of smoke. And that was it. So
probably the first time he's had to use it for
that's it.
a number of years.
No, it was a brand new install. First time up, whoosh, went up. So that was it. So that changed. I went, oh, okay, that changes the game. So we got out, but that was certainly off the beaten track. You can drive around most of the main tracks pretty comfortably with the 2-wheel drive if you take it easy.
Good. So you said that one of the beauties of this forest is that it holds game. What game have you encountered there?
Well, I've always known Severn as a goat forest. I've hunted there since 2009, I think. That was the first time I hunted there. And I hunted there pretty much solidly right through to the last couple of years, actually. I haven't been there for a couple of years now. But I'd be like, I'm honestly 25 to 30 times over that period, because it was just so easy to hunt, so easy to drive down there. And there was always goats there, but there was always this, and I wrote about it, this kind of this promise of pigs there as well. And that happened on the very first time I was there. One of the first time I was hunting Severn, I myself took 14 goats over a long weekend. And what happened during that period, I saw a pig, and I let a wild shot off it, trying to anchor it, completely missed it. and I didn't see a pig again for nearly 10 years there.
No, interesting.
If not longer. No, it'd be about 10 years probably in all terms. Did not see a pig until I managed to actually no, it wasn't that long. It was many years though. Saw that pig, and I managed. There was a couple of times over those years that the pig sign got really, really good, and we thought, oh, we're really close, but we never connected. And then when it got really dry around 2012, 2013, I think, the sign just disappeared. And it was in a really stinking hot summer that I managed to take a pig there. And that was because we found some water and that pig was on that water source.
Yeah.
Now, I myself have never seen a deer in there, but I have very, very good information that there are deer there, but I've never seen one.
It's smack bang in the middle of deer country.
It
screams deer, but it doesn't have the right type of feed, I think, to hold them. So I think you'll find that they traverse through between farm and farm that border the park, but there's not a lot of great deer habitat, I guess, in there. It really is well suited to the goats. And as you say, the pigs in certain areas of it. My very first trip to Severn, I was confident that I saw a deer in the southwestern corner of the block. But because it was my first trip, I was like, okay, well, I saw a deer. That's great. There's deer here. And it's the last sighting of a deer I've ever seen. And sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between a dusty deer print and a pig print. I can't say that I've seen any other scat sign or anything like that. So I don't know. It's a bit of a mystery to me. Like the pig was a mystery to you, the deer was a mystery to me. My first trip down there, I saw half a dozen pigs, not all together, in separate locations, all around water sources. And on various different occasions, I've seen pigs in that park. Some very big, healthy, big black boars, and one big backfatter, a big white pig in a completely different area of the park to what I thought it would be in. In fact, I was showing somebody else through the block at the time, and he was armed with his bow, and we were within about 5 meters of it, and he managed to hit the only twig between him and the pig, unfortunately, and the arrow disappeared in the wrong direction. But we've certainly seen them. But it's interesting because I don't know why, but I would step over a pig to shoot a goat or a deer. They don't interest me as much as other game. I sort of put them in the back of my mind, and they only get beaten up by me if they get in the way more than anything else. But I'm sure that will change in time, given that they're there, and it's something worth pursuing because other people find them really hard to step across, and I guess it's because they're looking so hard for them. I'm not looking, and they pop up.
Not to move off too much into the sad story of my pig hunting. I have always looked for pigs, and it's always been a hard graft. Literally, I've been in places where it's raining goats, and I've done all right with the deer, but the pigs have always been the big challenge for me. And it's funny because I really, really like hunting pigs. I actually probably more than like it, but I just don't have a great deal of luck with the pigs. I have been lucky with pigs, but I don't have big numbers. I just got very recently, I think I cracked the tonner, the 100 kilos, and that was purely on a deer scouting mission. And this pig just ran past me, and I just popped him. And as soon as I saw him, I thought, I forgot all about the deer. I'll come back for the deer, but this pig. So that's interesting. That's just me. That's it. I very rarely would. I don't think I could pass up a pig.
I passed up.
I could do it. I could not do it.
I think the reason for me is that I'm a big fan of only taking what I want to eat. I started my whole hunting career, if you want to put it that way, with these, grander ideas that just wanted to hunt for meat, and I didn't care about antlers, and I didn't care about tusks, and it was really just a meat gathering exercise, and I really enjoyed the process. That was until I stood in front of my first croaking buck, and I got the fever at that point, and now I'm all for it. And I love every bit of it. But pigs to me in Australia, and I'm happy to be told otherwise, and plenty of people will disagree with me, and they do every day around this, but plenty of people have had bad experiences eating wild pork out of the bush. There were cases of people not long ago where a family ate wild pork, and 3 of the 4 of them died. Things like that. Now, there'll be reasons for that, and I'm sure there's risks amongst all things, but I haven't convinced myself that it's a healthy meat to pull out of the bush. And I reckon that's a great topic for another podcast, but that's why I don't pursue them, because I've always put them as you shoot them and leave them, not shoot them and take the meat. And I know you'll tell me otherwise.
Oh, no, look, I mean, I've hunted pigs, and I've seen pigs that literally, if they were pink, they'd be at KR Darling Downs. They were that healthy. But I've also seen other pigs. For instance, one time we were hunting in the Pilliga, and there was a time we saw the most pigs ever. And for some reason, we first saw it, and even when we saw them at distance, they all had this white stripe on their nose, and we're going, what is that? And what we realised was that it was a stripe. It was the loss of hair. They were rooting so hard for food. It was so tough that they were wearing off all the hair off their nose. And every single one of them, state forest, and you're supposed to knock them, and we were knocking them over. I didn't want to touch them. Literally, they were in shocking conditions, and they had that thing where their heads like bigger than their body. They were. Well, I wouldn't even consider taking. I didn't take a skerrick of meat off them. Took goat meat, but those pigs, we left them right along, and that's it. Those kind of animals. And I remember one time I was hunting up in North Queensland, and it was quite hot, and they were carrion eaters, and you could just smell them. You just go, I don't want to have anything to do with that meat. It stinks while it's it's still alive. So
yeah, I completely understand that. Yeah, so it's a good park, and it's got a couple of different types of game that are in there, and we haven't really even spoken about bunnies and foxes and wild dogs and things that frequent the area as well. So there's plenty there. One of the things that I guess stops a lot of people from going there is when you go and have a look at the map online, it's a tiny little park, and for many years it's had a third of it cut out of the middle. And that third gets put back in and taken back out and put back in and taken back out. And there's various reasons for it. And a lot of it, I think, has been around forestry. And in fact, the park was closed completely a couple of times over the last couple of years. And it's reopened now to the full size that it's been for many, many years. But it can be off-putting because people want quite a large block of land to roam around. A lot of state forests, when you go to them, you can cover a lot of ground and not see much. So I think people look at the grid squares and go, geez, that's tiny. Is it worth my time? My message to anyone is it's absolutely worth your time. Only 3 hunters that usually can book into it. And there's no way you're going to cover the whole thing over a weekend. If you're actually hunting it and doing a good job of it. So have you found the size at all a problem?
Look, I understand that logic. And in a way, I'm experiencing that right now with some of the blocks I'm hunting for red deer, because they are small blocks. But what I've come to the realization is, that doesn't necessarily matter at all. And in fact, the good thing about Severn has and it still is that it produces, a much bigger ratio than what you would think it was going to produce. It's abundant in wild game, and I've had people tell me there's nothing there, you'll never find anything there, and you'll say, well, how'd you go? I haven't bothered because there's nothing there. And I said, well, maybe you're doing yourself a disservice. Never not taken an animal out of Severn.
I'm the same. I've never ever come out of there with. Yep. There's been. Oh no! Even on that occasion, I was going to say there wasn't an occasion where there were just so many in there that I'd already shot 4 and was in the process of sorting them out. And probably the largest billy that I've ever seen poked his head up over the rock to have a look at what I was doing. Back in the days, like I was talking about before, where I was hunting for meat and I wasn't hunting for horns or antlers, and I sat there and I looked at the sky and I thought, far out, if I didn't have 4 on the ground, you're toast, mate. And he looked at me for 4 or 5 minutes. In fact, I rang my good friend Trevor at the time and said, I've got a bit of a conundrum. I've got 4 on the ground and I've got this massive billy looking at me. Do I take it or do I leave it for next time? Thinking I'll protect the part for myself for later. I ended up leaving it. I just left it alone. And it was a stonking great billy. It was one of those things like the pig, or like the deer that I saw the first time I came. Oh, if he's here, there's going to be more. That's okay. I'll leave them and I'll get on to what I'm doing. I caught up with him on the next trip again, but I just felt that he was so easy to get to that it would have made an absolute cracking bow trophy for somebody. And 2 of my friends were coming up the next day with their bows, so I left them, and I've never seen them again, unfortunately. But that's the way it works, right?
Yeah, well, it does. Look, it's not closed. There's a lot of people go through there. So yeah, I have never not been successful in Severn. The only time, in fact, I've never been successful myself, but even the party was successful. I had to leave early, but I was as I was leaving, the guys had just taken goats. So I said, I've got to go. So I've never, and I don't know, well, I've introduced a number of people to goat hunting at Severn.
I love it. Yeah,
I can think of
I
5
really
or
do.
6 guys off the top of my head that I've taken there and said, okay. They said, look, I've never hunted goats. I said, oh, come with me. We'll go to Severn. We'll get you a goat. And that's what's happened. They've got goats. And from a bow hunting point of view, it probably work very well because it's pretty tight country. You'd be able to close the gap pretty well. And I think that's what also puts a lot of people off. It's a bit scrubby. So if you're used to shooting open farmland, where there's a crop and the animals are drawn, you might go, what's there? But for me, the goats, that gives them a fantastic home, and they're goats, so they'll browse anything anyway. So there's always food in there. There's always water in there. Even at the driest point, I've never found it completely dry.
Never
We
ever.
thought it was, but we found water. When we found water, that's when we found the animals. They knew where it was. There seems to be always scrubby food sources there. It also has what I think are the 2 main ingredients for goats: rocks. Goats love rocks. They love rocks.
Yeah, they
And
do. Yep.
and cactus. They love that cactus.
The prickly pear.
Yeah, they love it. They love if you can find goats, if you can find rocks and cactus or prickly pear, you're going to find goats. And
Yeah, for sure.
in fact, again, I was in Pilliga late last year, and it was pretty hard work. It'd been raining, and so the whole place had changed. And I was with one of the guys that I'd taken down the first time, and I said, and we came to this rock escarpment. I said, did I ever tell you how much goats love rocks? And he said, no. Nah. And I said, let's go around here. And sure enough, that's where they were. They're on the rocks. So that's what and because the Severn's part of that New England region, it does have that granite and boulder country. And there's actually one, I suppose, granite escarpment in Severn that is got so much goat scat on it. It's just you can almost smell it as you approach it. So and that's like one of those centres where the goats seem to concentrate in there, and they do it for a lot of different reasons. One, it gives them a very good home. It gives them a high altitude. For whatever reason, goats like to stand on top of things, so they get up there and they get up high. And it's directly above a water source too.
Yeah, well, I've found I know the one you're talking about, and without ruining the surprise for everybody, because part of doing this is actually getting in there and discovering these things, but just to know that those features exist. I think there's sort of 3 of those areas, but the one you're talking about is the most prominent one. There's another one in the centre, which is sort of just south of the main road that goes through. And then there's another big rocky outcrop right down the bottom of the map. And they all seem to be feature points for goats. the further south you go, the denser it gets and the scrubbier it gets. It's come that way since I think a fire ripped through it and the hot bushes come back up through it. But so there are a couple of those features, but probably also worth mentioning. Well, I'll just cover off a couple of water things. There are sort of 6 main dams that are in that and that are in the park that I've never seen dry, and there's sort of one reasonable creek on the southern side, which is sort of where you tend to find a lot of pigs in the summer, where I have anyway. But those water sources are there. How else would you describe the various sections? Do you break it up into bits? And because I find there's sort of 3 different types of terrain in Severn. You've got the rocky escarpment and that high country up in the top left-hand corner. And then you've sort of got floodplain down the centre, and then you drop down into the gully with the river on the southern side, or the creek on the southern side. And I sort of view those as 3 very different hunting locations with their own features and their own water sources. I don't know, how do you break it up in your brain?
Well, whenever someone says, "Okay, I want to hunt Severn," I say, "Okay." The way I describe it is actually this guy Mick who's going down there very soon, and we've been talking about this. When you look at it on the map, you'll see that the main road, I think that might be the road that you take off the Bonshaw Road to drive into Severn, kind of splits the park into 2.
Yeah.
And very roughly I call it the North Block and the South Block. That's how I tend to. Now the North Block has probably the best vehicle access. So you can drive a vehicle around most of the North Block. Of course, you don't cover the whole block, but there's a ring track that goes through the North Block. So, you can basically walk that vehicle track if you want. The Southern Block has very little vehicle access at the moment because I think most of the access is through private land. So when you go into the Southern Block, you tend to run into vehicle tracks, but they're already in there, and I'm pretty sure they must come through from private land. So the northern block has a rock escarpment right in the middle of it, and it tends to kind of run down into the surrounding farmland more towards the east. And the southern block is very much a tangle. It's very, very heavy cover at places. In fact, it's that ridiculously hard cover at places. There's a lot of rock. There is some rock formations, but there's also just a lot of rock through that area. So you're spending a lot of time moving across rock, around rock, and it creates natural pathways. There's a lot of small creeks running through there and gullies. Even not on the map, you come across little things like that. So I always kind of say, if you're going to go there for a weekend and say you're going to hunt 2 days, pick which block you want to do on foot, which is the southern block, and which part you want to maybe drive and explore, which is another block, and just pick which one you want to do. So that's always my weekend approach to Severn. And the southern block has a very big dam close to the road. It's above the road. And it's a funny dam because I've actually never seen game on it.
Is that right?
Never seen game on that particular dam. It's a big dam too.
Yeah, it is. It's very shallow.
It's very shallow.
It covers quite a bit of land.
I've never seen it dry,
No.
but I've never seen game on it. But I've seen signs, lots and lots and lots of sign, but I've never seen where the game is in that. With the within the southern block, we've always taken game either right in the middle or down what you might call on the southern block on the eastern fence line and along that way. Okay. The block seems again kind of dumps out into the private land on the eastern side, and there's actually quite a swampy little place where the fence line kind of crosses what obviously is where the water comes through. Seen some really good pig sign down there. I have never seen pigs there, but seen really good pig sign down there. And what we often do is we walk. So if we walk out of camp, we walk down the main road, we get to that fence line, which is get to that fence line, which is to the east of the southern block, where it actually says, the the no hunting sign is talking about private property next. Follow that fence line down. It goes down, and you go straight down.
The main eastern boundary you're talking about now.
Right.
That's now cleared, by the way. They've run a bulldozer down it.
Yeah, well, there was always kind of a track there, but it was so overgrown. Yeah, so there was you should realize when you were going through there, you're going, yeah, I think we're on an old track here.
Yeah.
And you got down, and then we'd hook south and then go into the block that way, and basically do a great big loop, and generally often come out at that big dam on the way out. That would be a
really
big
interesting.
Loop.
Really interesting. So I've never considered hunting it in that way. I hunted a completely different way. And so for me in the southern block, I break the southern block into two, right? The east and the west, or the northeast and the southwest, if you want to call it. And it's easy to identify that because right down the guts of that southern block is a creek. And if you look at the map, there's a creek that runs all the way down and then all the way into private land. And to me, that cuts that block in half. Now, in times gone past, all the country between the main centre road and that creek was exclusion. You couldn't hunt it.
Yeah.
That creek was actually the border of the hunting. You could only hunt on the southwestern side of the creek. Touching on that dam, I've seen plenty of game on that dam, always when it was an exclusion zone. So I couldn't shoot any of them, right? But they were there, and it always fascinated me, this area, because just above that big dam is another big rocky outcrop with loads of goat sign on it. It's a big cave up there. It looks like it's an old dog den. It's a really interesting bit of country in there, and beautiful views. And I sat up on there and listened to goats bleating, kids bleating and telling you where they were. And I followed them down to that dam, and I watched them for ages. And they never left because they were safe. Didn't go anywhere. But going back to hunting that block, I always came in from the northwestern side boundary. So you go all the way to the end of Mount Hallam Road to the top boundary.
Yep.
And then I drop in. And there's a if you're looking at the map, and we'll put the map up, from the road you come down, and then it comes across like this. Right, that corner is actually the farmer's dead pile. If you didn't know that, you'll always go back to it, because that dead pile is obviously where the piggies go. Now, you can't shoot them on the dead pile because that's the neighbour's land, right? But you can make a hell of a racket, and they can run for their lives. And once they're in the state park, they're fair game. I got a really funny video of doing that once upon a time. But a lot of pigs seem to concentrate their way up that way because of that dead pile. I don't know if it's still used as the same area by the farmer, but certainly last time I looked at it, there were during the drought there were half a dozen or more animals in there at different stages of rot. So that's the smorgasbord. About 100 metres south of that point is the start of is basically the head of that creek, and I've always followed that sandy creek all the way in, and followed that down as far as I wanted to go until I stumbled across goats. And there's some beautiful clearings on that creek. It holds pools of water, and depending on what time of the year you're going and what the condition is, there's little waterfalls and things like that. But in the heat, if you're going to go and attack it in summer, I could tell you if you walk along that creek, you're going to bump into pigs, because it's where the water is, and they just hide in the reeds. They bounce up in front of you, and off they go. And unfortunately, every time I do that, I'm carrying a bow, and I can't knock fast enough. And it's always been exclusion to the north of the creek, and that's always where they run uphill into the northern centre section of the Severn State Forest map. But that's just the way it goes. But I've always found them in there. Off to the southern southwestern side, there's again rocky outcrop escarpment that you're talking about. There's some high points, and there's always sign up there. That is a hellishly nasty country in there, though. You got to be committed to get in there now. It's the worst I've ever seen it. I had a friend go in there the other day and knock a couple of goats in there with a new state forest hunter. He went with a chaperone, if you want to call it that. It was his first hunt ever in our licensed country, and he thought he was going to walk into one of these forests and just wander around and go and shoot something and would not have to work too hard for it. Well, he was absolutely ratchet by the time he was finished. and the goats that were in there were covered in those little sticky black thorny things.
Yeah.
They were just absolutely covered in them. So why they live there, I'm going to put it down to pressure. They're pushing their way into there because no one wants to go down there. But they're there. They're there to take. You just got to work for them. That's my take of that southern section. Right?
Yeah. So we kind of swing depending on the wind, you see, we'd swing the other way up, and that creek line that you're talking about, that we always use that as a bit of a geographical. Okay, we know kind of we're crossing that. We'll probably start to swing back up now, and start swinging back up, and basically come out above that dam. We'd come up where it comes down onto that dam, and then we'd cross down, because we often used to camp on the northern side where that little dam is, on just basically opposite across the road. There's a little dam down there, and we would camp down there. So that's where. So we would basically come walking back into camp in the evening.
Yeah, so you'd get to that dam on the south side, cross the road on the way up. Yeah, that's that one where you camp. That's probably one of the larger dams on the block. I know you call it a small dam, but it's one of the large dams on the block.
Yeah, it's where the water. It's actually got that the creek crosses the road, and it drains into it. And there's even a little it almost looks like someone tried to dam it once. And there is another dam in the center of the northern block where you can actually see someone did dam it. There is actually a remains of a concrete barrier that they would have mixed up somehow and brought it in there. And that's the other thing in Severn. It was obviously squatting block or something like that, and it's reverted back to state land. So you do find these structures in there. I've found barbed wire horse pens. There's a couple of house dumps you'd find. There's a bit of machinery in one of the paddocks, so you find those.
There's a mine.
Yeah, there's a mine in there. That's right. So there's all sorts of and there's that dam that someone actually built, which actually holds a good bit of water at the right time of year. So that the southern block is the tough block, and so as I said, if you're going to hunt Severn, pick a day to do the southern block.
Oh, yeah, and look, honestly, you could spend your whole weekend in the southern block.
Oh, yeah.
By the time you figure it out, when you know your go-to spots, you're right. You know exactly where you're going. You know the tricks of the trade into that spot. It makes a really good day hunt. Another tip, though, there is a bit of a climb getting out of it. It's not ridiculous, but you got to manage your water down there because it gets steamy. So you got to be super careful down there if you're doing it in the summer months. I've found myself dehydrated coming out of there once or twice.
Yeah, and look, I was there once with someone who did get in a bit of trouble. We obviously managed to get them out, but they did find it, and that was it. It does, it's very, very closed country. There's no breeze. The water supply, if it's there, is a bit effy. And so, and it's one of those ones you've got to walk in and you've got to walk out. That's what you've got to do. So you've got to be prepared. And as I said, that's why I say to people, if you're going to do the southern block, give it a day and say that's my tough day. And then the second day, you can hunt the northern block and take it a bit easy. Move in the car, get out, walk, have plenty of water with you in the truck, come back, do a little bit more scouting. Of course, you can do some really tough walks in the northern block as well. One year, I was actually hunting there by myself and ended up on the front cover of one of the AAA mags. For some reason, I just decided that I was in the northern block now, and I decided to go up into the real top country.
Yep.
And it was by myself, and with hindsight, probably wasn't the wisest thing I did, but I climbed up there, up on some rocks, and got right up the top there and found the old telegraph line that used to run across the top. So there was a bit of once upon a time there was certainly work going on there, and people went to all the effort of running a telegraph line. There was a bit of old barbed wire up there, so it once was fenced, but it's pretty wild up in there, and didn't see a lot of game. But then again, I was probably spending more time just on navigating and doing the climb. But I came back down on the dam in the afternoon and ran into a good mob of goats on the dam on the afternoon, and I'm pretty sure I circled them inadvertently. So the northern block is, as we said, you can access a lot of the northern block by vehicle. And probably this guy got bogged. He was probably either on the main ring track or one of the spur tracks that run off that main ring track where you can get bogged. And when I think about where we got bogged, there's a couple of soaky parts that can be quite treacherous. The interesting thing about the northern block was there's like a ring road, but there's also another road that spurs off that goes up into what we used to call the highlands. So that goes up to one of the high peaks.
Yep.
And it's a fair bit of
top
rock
left-hand corner.
Yeah.
Yep. The top northwestern corner. Yep.
There's a fair bit of rock climbing up there. I mean, it's not impassable. It's not hard stuff in a four-wheel drive, but it's certainly the roughest part of the park, probably for driving.
I was going to say that is the area you would not take your two-wheel drive.
No, that's it. And we used to drive to the very top and actually be overlooking our camp, park up there, and do a big loop walk and come back up. And it gave us an ability to drop down into some of the ravine country and follow the water along the ravine country. There was a place we used to always, we called it the kindergarten, because we always ran across family mobs of goats in there. It was obviously a place that they used to hold up because it was very safe. Always found them in there. Never see too many big billies in there. It was always the nannies and the kids. Further, and that would run out into some open country for a little while, and then it would close out again, and you'd pick up the track again. And that was actually just along that track is where I got Timmy's first goat ever, down there at Severn, just where that track ran out. And that was one of the few places we've actually encountered wild dogs too down that
Okay.
way.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I find in that top block, if you go all the way up Mount Hallam Road to pretty much 20 metres from the boundary, there's a track that runs up.
Yeah.
And if you follow that track, it then crosses the creek really quickly. And then the first left-hand track as you go back into the bush is a little track that goes up, and it goes all the way up onto the boundary fence line. And it's the most beautiful camp spot in the whole park.
Yes.
You're right up on the hill, you're against the boundary, and you're overlooking from a high point the whole park. And it's beautiful. As long as the wind is not too terrible, I love it up there. And we'll post a few pictures of some of these things up so that you can see them. But that's where I now recommend that people stay. I know people that have rolled out of bed and shot a goat on the pasture that's right there, because it seems to be the greenest, lushest part of the whole park. But it's a really nice spot to camp and just sit out there and have a nice beer at the end of the day. And I also find that it's up nice and high. You can actually sit up there and you can listen for the goats.
Yeah.
Even though they're going to be way off in the distance, you can hear them up in your highlands area that you talked about. So it's directly north of where you're sitting. And you can hear them over in the distance. But you get a really good appreciation for how undulating, how hilly, how rocky, how outcroppy that park is from up there. It's really nice.
And that fence line that you back up to is heavily treed too, so you've got a good wind stop behind you if it's coming from behind you. There was for many years an old ram that used to live up there.
It's not just a ram. I was sitting in camp. It was the camp the night we were going to pack up, and 4 wild sheep wandered straight through our camp. And I only say they were wild because they were so big with their woolly coats. They hadn't been shorn in must have been 5 years. Would have made not a bad mutton stew, but they're off the hit list domestic animals in state parks, even if they're wild.
Yeah, there was an old ram there, and he used to be up there, and it was almost like a token, because we would camp down below that and look up, and when we used to see him, we'd see him up there. We got close to him a couple of times. The guy, poor old thing, had hardly any teeth in him and stuff like that. He was living a pretty hard old life.
Toenails would have been this long.
That's right. We used to see him, and he was a bit of a good luck token. If we ever saw him, we knew, we're going to be on, because he was up there at the top. Yeah, that's a funny area. That it's there's actually in that long grass as you just before you cross that creek, there was an old bit of farm machinery in there. I think someone grabbed it a few years ago. It was probably
Still a
worth,
bit there.
probably worth a lot of money, and someone came back and grabbed it as, as an antique. But there, that's a very panoramic part. And if you get up there, there is a track that'll take you to what we used to call the Highlands. You can go there. So it can be a great launch point from up there. A friend of mine shot 4 goats up there on the first night he ever camped at Severn. He took the advice and he was camping at the dam, and he got his camp out and he took his binos up and looked up that hill, because you look straight up, and he said that he saw them up there, crossed the creek, crossed the dam, went through this old wire fence, up through there, shot them up there on the hill.
Yep. There's I keep saying I know where the goats are going to be, and I'm pretty confident that I'm going to get goats when I go there. The same spot almost every time, and it stopped me exploring a lot of the park for a long time because there was no need to do it. But now it's not all about taking the animals; it's also about exploring the park. So I've gotten around quite a lot of it. That Highlands area is really nice. It's nice to get up there. It is a steep walk. There's no doubt about it. If you're driving in your car the first time, you think, "Oh God, I wouldn't want to be walking that." But by the time you sneak up it, again, that's where I've seen wild dogs up that way, and some of those really steep re-entrants. But it's a nice part of the block for sure.
Yeah, there's some serious gully country up through there, and you often see a lot of either roos or emus up there as well. That seem to be up in that gully country up there, where it hits a heavy. The tree line is very, very heavy against the boundary line, and it seems to provide a really good. And I'd actually don't know what's on the other side, because I never bother pushing through that fence and have a look, because that's a boundary line. But you do see a lot of the macropods and the emus come through there. So I'm wondering if there's a good water source on the other side or something like that.
Yeah, there must be on the farmer's land.
Yeah.
But that's up that part for sure. And like you say, there's some other it's not a natural dam. They're all dams that have been man-made, but some of them have been made in water courses, and others seem to be holding water without too much of a natural flow into them. But you sort of, if you get around on that loop track you're talking about, you'll bump into those 3 dams, and if you situate yourself somewhere where you can get around those 3 dams, on foot, if you think that you're going to find animals on water, you're probably right. My tactic for chasing goats is to find a high point and get up there early. Make sure you've got the wind with you, and just listen for a while, because goats breed so quickly. There's usually kids on the ground, and just like kids, and just like your kids and my kids and everyone else's kids, they're noisy little shits sometimes, and they jump around and play and they bleat and they have a good time, and they give themselves away. And normally I find, either I'm on this high point and the goats are going to be feeding to the closest water in the direction you can hear them, or they're on their way back to the high point.
Yeah.
You just got to intersect them, and they cover some ground.
You usually catch them either going or coming back from water. I very rarely have come to a dam and it's like goats on the dam. It's not something that's ever happened to me. I've either caught them before or after. There is on that loop track, the northern loop track, and as you said, the 3 dams you hit. The first dam that you come to is it's a natural runoff, and you can tell it runs down into the dam. So you can actually pull up 500-600 meters away and walk down the road a bit, and you actually do get quite a nice panorama of that dam. You can look through the trees and look onto it. So
you're talking about the one in the center of the block.
Yeah, it's. I would call it the first dam that you come to if you're doing.
Depends which way you're going around the loop.
I'm trying to think. If you're doing a clockwise rotation around the northern loop, it'll be the first dam you come to. The second dam can be quite tricky because it's if you were driving on it, because it's kind of well concealed. You kind of bump into it. The third dam is a really good one to walk on, and that's actually where I got the pig off. I got that pig off the bottom dam, the third dam. But that first dam, I've shot more goats within, say, a kilometre radius of that area than anywhere else singularly, and mostly behind that dam, in fact.
Yeah, okay.
As I said, I've never seen them on the dam. I've either come like, oh, look, they're coming in, they're coming on, or they're coming off, but haven't been lucky enough to, come across and have them all lined up on the watercourse. In regards to the kids too, you're damn right. They'll give the game away every time.
Yeah. Well, I've found that first dam you're talking about that's on that natural watercourse. That's where I shot my first goat with a bow, actually, off that dam. And it has some excellent cover. You're right. You get the Vids, but it's got excellent cover all the way around it. My recommendation to anyone going into this block is don't drive that loop. I mean, maybe drive it just to get your bearings, but on hunt day, don't drive that loop.
Yeah.
Get within that 500-600 meters of the first dam and leave your car. And I would walk in on that dam. The next dam is only going to be another probably 15 minutes walking, 15 to 20 minutes walk along that track. There's a concentration of goats in that area. I just leave the car behind. But you get to that dam, and then the next dam around, as you talk about, the one that you shot the pig on, is again only another 15 to 20 minutes. Right? If you at a brisk walk, you can cover the ground around to those dams quite easily. And I've found that centre one that we're talking about. I've managed to sneak up on loads of goats on that dam. There's a row of trees between the road. So there's the road, the row of trees, and a dam, and you can sneak along the road quite quietly because you've got nothing underfoot. It's all just sandy.
And in fact, there's a creek that runs into it that you can actually just follow parallel that creek line up, and then the creek always dumps into the dam. So there's a point where you're a bit exposed, but it gives you also a great window to look in. About traveling that loop, a number of times we've just driven in to say, and parked at the beginning of the loop and with got our gear and just did a full loop and walked around. Or depending on the wind, just gone the other way. And you can, and that is, it's actually a really comfortable. I wouldn't guess how long it takes you, because I've never walked it like a forced march.
You tend to run into something, don't you?
That's right. Yeah, we move and stop and snack and move, but it's like a half a day of a pretty easy walk. And if you got game, it's not hard to reverse back out and get back to the vehicle and get to the game pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's about a 6.5 kilometre loop.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is not a big day.
No,
it's not even a big morning. And you're on a track, you're not bashing your way through trees. You can move quickly and quietly. Not that I suggest you move quickly, but you typically bump into something along the way, and you never get to finish the loop anyway.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's why I put it down to like a half a day, because as you said, 6.5 Ks. If you're walking, 6.5 Ks along the footpath, you should do that in just over an hour in a brisk walk. Yep. But you're not doing that. There's so much opportunity to stop, look, and listen along there, that giving yourself, doing it in the morning and say, okay, we'll be back at the truck by lunchtime for a feed, and then go for an afternoon explore in the truck. It's actually a really good way of doing that, and it will produce. And you might spear off for a while and go and explore. As I said, I found that looking at a dam can be a little deceptive, because all your vision gets focused on that water. You want to go around it, because they're often just held up just behind it. They've had a feed, and then they've gone back in the shade and laid down again. So they're there just behind the water. They're not on the water course at the time. In fact, the pig was the pig that I shot off the dam was one of the first animals I actually literally shot off a dam. It was there wallowing. It was right there in the wallow.
Yeah, well, every animal that I think I've shot in this area, I know has either been on its way to water, it's on its way back, and it's just coming up to a high point somewhere nearby, or it's just off it. But you're right, and so it's always water focused, and that's the way they are in these scrubby blocks. They've got to water a couple of times a day. They just happen to be magic hour, beginning and the end of the day for us. But in saying that, goats tend to browse all day. They don't bed down as much as the likes of deer. They'll feed all day if they want to. But again, find a high point, use the wind, listen. There's some big basins in there when you get up high. There's some really nice big basins that work like amphitheaters that really bring the sound up to you. And I tell you, there's nothing better than sitting up on that hill and just waiting and having a cup of coffee and then just hearing that bleat go off and just a big smile on my face. I'm on to you fellas and I'm off. I'm going to go and track you down. That's awesome.
On that, what we call the Highlands, there's actually a track that where we used to walk down. So we'd park at the very top and start walking down one of the tracks, and there was a slight clearing just off the track, and it was almost like someone had created a lookout. And we sit there and just listen, and sit there 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, okay, there we go. It's over there somewhere. Okay, you listen, and then go, okay, then, concentrate the glassing, and there's a white flash, there it is, and that's it. And just there, you would get this wonderful effect where you could just hear for kilometres and you'd just go, yeah, and sometimes they would be a long way away, but you'd hear them and go, oh, they're moving, just wait, and sure enough, and they would come down into the gorge country, so they were funneling into you. So you just took some time. And if you think about those dams, at least two of them, the third one, if you were to go on a clockwise rotation, is probably the benefit of that dam is it's probably close. It's very close to farmland. And I actually think it gets a lot of animals moving between the farmland. But certainly the first dam and the second dam are very, very close to rocks. They're just off the first dam, for instance, the rocks are behind and what you might say to the left. And if you go in there, you nearly always find goats. On that second dam, the rocks are almost directly across the road. And if you go up, you'll find the goats. And that's what they do. They're up in the rocks. They come down, they go back up. So if you can find water and you can find cactus and you can find rocks, you find goats. And so that's how I would suggest someone who wanted to hunt Severn, first off, is think about it as how you want to hunt. If you want to do a hard foot slog, focus on the southern block. If you want to do an exploratory, you may be thinking, oh, maybe I'm not up for that kind of thing, or I'm by myself, or you're with another guy and you're both not confident. You can certainly stay in the northern block. Never be too far away from your vehicle, and you can still really get some goats on the ground. And as you said, you might get pigs. For me, it's always been a task, but certainly getting the goats, they're there. In terms of, the park itself, there's no real facilities. So taking everything you need. But again, since you've got such good vehicle access, you don't have to go super light pig camp. You can have a comfortable camp. You can find a good place to set up.
I'll drag a camper trailer in there, mate.
That's right. Well, that's it. And where you go, it wouldn't be that difficult. There's a bit of a climb, but even when you do, if I remember correctly, when you start climbing up there, even the grass gets a bit short, and you can see the rocks, so you know where to go.
Oh yeah, that's fine. It's frequented enough that the grass is pushed down in the track areas, but you get up onto that grassy plateau and there is a rocky area. You just take your time and have a look. Yeah. But yeah, I drag a camper trailer in there, and I've only just started using that top campground. One of the members of my branch that I went up there recently with, he showed me it, so I've stayed up there a couple of times now, and it's a picture. It's beautiful. Such a nice spot just to go and have a camp. It's great. Be careful of fires. I mean, I know it sounds silly because we're all big boys and girls, but it is pretty dry in there. So be careful of that. There is a sign, point to note. There's a sign at the beginning, and I know it was there this year, and it said, fires are closed for the whole summer season.
Yeah.
Now that's a forestry sign. That's not a fire ban sign. And there's a number on that one. So if you think that you're going in there and it's been and it's fairly wet, feel free to call that number. I've saved that number in my phone as I go there often enough, and I'll ring the forestry and just say, hey, look, it's pretty damp underfoot. I'm staying up in this top corner. There's a well-used fire ring. Can I have permission to light a fire? And usually the forestry guy who's on call says, yep, that's no problem, mate. We know it's okay because there's been rain. So, you can, just be nice about it and give the fellas a call because they can let you have those nice little extras if you ask.
I know that ban has just been lifted. Mate sent me something about it. It's literally just been lifted because when we were in the Pilliga in December, it was on. So, so basically it was no fires whatsoever. So no solid fuel fires whatsoever. So, and of course, then there's the normal fire ban that applies if you're down there in summer anyway, which is the more, global or more statewide fire ban that applies in New South Wales. But yeah, as you said, use your common sense or use, if you haven't, find out how to have a proper fire and have a control fire. It certainly adds to the whole experience being down there. In fact, I've cooked goat on a couple of fires at Severn over the years, and so it's the opportunity and it's all part of it. And you can make yourself a very nice camp. As you said, you've got to pull everything in. There's no water to speak of. If you pull everything in and you get yourself a good set of gear, it's a very pleasant place to stay. In fact, I know a guy who stays there without hunting, who travels a lot. He just pulls in there and stays in there. And he's got a place that stays in there because you're quite allowed to do that in New South Wales State Forests. Yep. So it's a very, very pleasant place to go. It's recently someone I got contacted by the game licensing unit. In fact, said, look, we've just had a guy from Queensland call us about hunting. He wants to talk to someone, and they put him on to me. And I had a good chat to him. Now he was an older guy. He'd hunted private land all his life, but never hunted public land, and had just finished his license. So this was his first hunt, and he was after goats. And the initial process or the initial discussion he got was go to the Pilliga. And I said, mate, and I had a good chat to him, and I said, it sounds like you're not all that experienced. And he said, well, yeah, I've always hunted private land, but I've stayed at the house and all that stuff. And I said, I'd try Severn. It's a lot easier. It's a good way of getting into public land hunting. You're going to have success. It's a pretty place in the right time of year, in the right conditions. It's a very pretty place to be. I've been down there also when it's dry as a bone and looks like a moonscape, but it can be a very nice place to be. And it's, it's 40 Ks from Texas. If it gets really bad, you can go stay in a hotel overnight if you really want. It's a pretty easy one to start with.
Yep, I agree. Just back on the fire point, a little known fact that people should know is that if there's a total fire ban, your permit is actually cancelled.
Yes.
You're not allowed to hunt under total fire ban. And that's, funnily enough, that was due to potentially starting a fire with your firearm. Not quite sure how that works, but it includes bows and pigs. So they just ban it. So be aware of that because it's part of your written permission.
That's a total fire ban that is called daily. Those things happen daily. You check with the New South Wales Rural Fire Brigade. They actually happen daily. So they'll say fire conditions are such that there's a total fire ban. But when there's an actually total fire ban, they actually apply that to everything. So they don't want, basically, and I saw there was a problem recently, like they don't want farm machinery to operate. They don't want anything to operate. Basically, don't want anything that's going to cause a spark. So that's but I also think New South Wales has a period where they just say no fires on public land for a period of time.
Yeah, that's a forestry call more than a total fire ban from the fire brigade. So keep knowing. The other thing to note is Severn's been quite heavily baited for dogs, aerial baited recently. It hasn't been baited for a long time. It has been now. It's June 2021 I'll just throw that out there. That's when the baiting. I'm looking at the map now that it's been baited, in case someone listens to this in a year's time. So if you're taking your dog in there, I take my dog in there to track. Teach them to be on a muzzle. Not because they bite, but because you don't want them to pick that stuff up. It's nasty. Yeah. So the only other thing I was going to ask, Mark, is So I've got a theory about this. I think the goat numbers in this park, they're still there. They're making it work harder for them than when you and I may have started hunting there, and you'd see 30s and 40s and 50s on a trip in. The price of goat meat has gone up significantly over the last couple of years. In fact, it's more expensive now than lamb, which is just incredible. But that's where it's up to. Most widely eaten meat globally, so that contributes to it. What are your thoughts about the Great Goat Roundup that may or may not have had or have happened in our state parks? Because you hear that farmers have gone in there and with dogs and rounded them up and put them on trailers and sold them for live export, things like that. It's all rumor. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that drought has had more of an impact? Are you finding goats harder to get onto in the parks that you go to, or do you think it's just a natural cycle?
Okay, so look, I think like so many things, it's a whole lot of moving parts. Now, I have hunted state forests that have had clear sign of trapping. So like Pilliga is probably the most common, where you actually come across goat traps. And I was even speaking to a guy who worked for national parks, and you can actually, I believe, get a permit to do that. You can apply to have a permit to trap goats on public land. Not exactly sure how it works, but so it's allowed. So yes, I have found traps. Does the drought have an effect? It seems to have an effect in two ways. One is the general condition of animals decline, and in certain instances. However, on the plus side, in a way, it makes hunting easier because it concentrates animals. Yep. One of the hardest things is hitting a state forest just after rain, because the animals don't have to follow patterns anymore. Water is abundant. They just and we think about water as a dam. An animal doesn't need a dam; it needs a puddle.
Yeah.
So 20 mils of rain, there's a lot of puddles. And so, the drought conditions can actually work in your favour.
I agree with that.
We were hunting Pilliga. We hunted Pilliga in the winter of right in the middle of the drought, and what we realised was that the goats were just circling between the available water sources, and we were hunting in pairs. So me and Tim and a couple of other guys. And one day they hit the mob at one dam, and they went back and it wasn't there. But we were at the other dam, and the mob rolled in, and there was just goats everywhere. So, tough conditions concentrate animals because they need water. In terms of the effects that locals or the trapping and all that has on, look, I'm sure that happens. And I'm sure that it has an effect on animals, but I've never found it have an effect where there isn't any game. I think sometimes people kind of think that you're just going to walk in there and it's just going to be, it's going to be like a live shooting gallery. Now, we've both been in situations where it is, but that's just because you happen to be there at the very, very right time when things happen. State forest hunting by its very nature is hard. You've got to go out and you've got to look for game. It's not like going to a property where the farmer says, "Look, mate, I saw the pigs down in the back paddock. They're in my sorghum. They're going to be. I can show you where they've been eating it." And you go down there, and sure enough, they're going to be there, or they're going to be there 2 hours later. There's no one there to give you any advice, and two, because there's no infrastructure of feed, like there's no paddocks with grain. They don't feed that way. They feed more like wild animals. So they browse, they move, they're opportunistic. So you've got to work that cycle. And of course, then there's the other cycle of the actual animals on themselves. Goats don't behave the same way throughout the year, just like deer don't behave the same way throughout the year. They have cycles. The other big part of this is that, and I say this tongue in cheek, I don't know how many people have told me that all the animals have been shot out of a park.
Yeah, you hear it all the time.
And, in fact, if I go somewhere and someone doesn't tell me that, then I go, oh, okay. Everywhere I've been, like we've been in the Pilliga and we've gone into town and we've been talking to someone and said, oh, the helicopter went through last week and it shot the place out. There's nothing in there, and you kind of look at them and go, well, we won't mention the 12 we've already shot, but, or, the helicopters come out and there's no deer left. Yeah, there's deer there. The baiting program's wiped out. The pigs are still there. There's actually a really interesting thing in the game licensing unit test for the R license where it actually says something like it is now agreed that you can't physically or economically remove a species.
It's not feasibly possible.
Yeah, it's not feasibly possible to remove a species. Either economically it's not possible or physically, it's too hard. And if you think about this country, when people talk about this kind of thing about eradication, ask them to name 3 vertebrate species that were introduced to Australia that we've managed to get rid of.
Oh yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I actually can't think of one. It just doesn't happen. And so it doesn't happen. And if you're hunting somewhere that is a state forest that's surrounded by farmland, it will hold game. Now, you might not drive in and they might not be standing there on the track. They may be. They might not be. But it'll hold game.
I find the harder they are to find, the less people want to go there and the more opportunity there is for those that actually want to get out there and get their teeth stuck into something. This is a great park to explore. There's so many different facets to it. You can spend a lot of time there. And every time I go back, I really enjoy it. So I think that's been a really good session, Mark, about covering off Severn. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask them. There'll be a comments section, I'm assuming, or something here that we can answer some questions. Yep. I've dropped an email address or two on the last couple. Shameless plug for myself. I've recorded a YouTube video of hunting Severn. I'll put the link in for that if anyone's interested in having a look at that. It'd be really good to watch that in parallel to listening to this conversation because you'll get a sense of the country, the rock, the ground, the dams, the condition, the goats and those sorts of things. So feel free to go and have a look at that. If you're listening to this and you don't have an R license, they're easy to get. If you're an Australian Deer Association member, then you will have someone in your branch that can do them. I sit them for the Darling Downs branch up here, and there are other people in the Brisbane and various other branches that can do that for you. If you're not in the ADA, doesn't mean you can't contact us. We can help you out. But also you can jump on the website and go to the Game Licensing Unit website and you can request a contact details be sent to you and you'll get a list of assessors in your general vicinity. There's no real excuse. If you want to get out there and hunt, these parks are there. They're available. They've got game. You'll have a great time. I do recommend that you go with a friend. I wouldn't tackle some of these things on your own to start with. You want to get a good feel for it and not get yourself into trouble. If you haven't listened to the previous episode about gear, go and have a listen to that. There's a few things that we recommend that you take into these parks to keep yourself safe. But other than that, I think that's probably it from me. Mark, any last comments before we close this one off?
What moment I thought about that, and I thought about something you said, I said once upon a time, and Severn is scrubby, dusty, rocky, and I love it. And really, it's a great spot. And it's a great spot to start your public land hunting adventure. I can't recommend enough to have a crack at Severn.
Good stuff.
Okay.
All right, mate.
Thanks very much, mate.
But I'll talk to you on the next one.
We will.
See ya.